Welcome to Clothesline Theatre. We have been waiting for you to tune in to hear tales of Prince Edward Island, a place of history and some mystery. You may be surprised by the true stories that have been unearthed and brought to life by our radio dramas. We invite you to settle into a comfortable chair and let the voices and sounds trigger your imagination as you hear the following dramatic story.
Canada's smallest province, Prince Edward Island, has no mineral resources. Yet it experienced its very own gold rush from 1910 to 1914, thanks to the little silver mines known as silver black foxes. The backstory began in 1894 and 1895 when Charles Dalton and Robert Alton of Tignish won the world race to be the first to successfully raise and breed foxes in captivity. Amazingly, they were followed in 1896 by Benjamin I. Rayner and his father Silas from the nearby community of Greenmount. Now, the four agreed to keep their success secret, but in 1899, Dalton, in a moment of weakness, allowed his friend Robert Tuplin and his partner, Captain James Gordon, into the game. So now there were 6 men from Western PEI making a fortune selling pelts to the fur fashion centers of Europe. Known as the Big Six Combine, the men made an agreement to work in secret and keep everyone else out of the industry. Things went splendidly until the nephew of Robert Tuplin, the last man in, arrived on the scene in 1906.
Morning, Alice. That's a fine smell coming from the old frying pan.
Just fried potatoes and onions. But with homemade bread and a cup of tea, it will hit the spot. I wish I could fry you an egg, Frank. But we need them all for selling right now.
I know, Alice. The farm mortgage is due next week, and we need every cent we can get.
And cents are all we're making for all of our hard work on this rundown farm. Selling eggs for 8 cents a dozen and pork at 4 cents a pound isn't getting us anywhere. We don't even eat well, Frank. There has to be a better way.
I've been thinking the same thing, Alice. We know that Uncle Robert is suddenly in the money. He's trying to keep the how a secret. But the rumors around the countryside say he's one of the men who are successfully breeding and raising foxes, but they won't let anyone else in on the industry.
If they are, that's just plain selfish. There are so many people like us, needing a little help to lift us up. Here, have some tea.
I was thinking of paying him a visit and seeing what I can find out.
I doubt it will do you any good, but what's the harm? It will give you a break from the farm. And by the way, Frank, what's so special about a silver black fox?
Well, they're a fluke of nature. Just a red fox with more pigment in their skin. But the fashion industry is crazy for their pelts. I suppose the Big Six are breeding the red out so they get a silver black every time.
Frank rode over a day on horseback from his New Annan farm to his Uncle Robert's house in Western PEI. Using a little charm and flattery, Frank was able to persuade his uncle to reveal his secret that he was indeed successfully raising foxes, with Captain James Gordon as his backer and partner. Now, Robert gave his young nephew a tour of the secluded ranch and no doubt laughed as he recounted the story of wearing Charles Dalton down into agreeing to sell him a breeding pair. What Frank saw and heard filled him with envy and excitement. His uncle had become a rich man on silver black foxes, and Frank desperately wanted a share of the pie.
Before you leave, come up to the house for a cup of tea. Take a seat. I'll get the tea.
Uncle Robert, will you sell me a pair of breeding stock?
Now you know not to ask me that. Gordon, Dalton, Alton, and the 2 Rayners and I have an agreement to keep this new industry to ourselves.
But your persistence got you and Gordon into the game, and the other 4 are still making money. That proves there's room for more. You guys won't notice a cent of difference in your profits by letting me in.
If I open the door a crack, then the first thing it'll be pushed wide open, and there'll be nothing for anyone.
But Uncle, foxes could help me get my feet under me and give Alice the life she deserves. I would honor your trust in me and never break the terms of our contract you draw up. The others won't even know that you sold them to me. I could say I successfully grew them from foxes I caught in the wild.
Robert Tuplin looked at the earnest and eager face of his nephew, and no doubt saw something of himself. He also saw the threadbare clothing and the thinness of his old horse, and felt a little guilt about his own recent wealth. But he also remembered that his word was his bond to the men of the Big Six Combine. He needed an honorable way out with his nephew, and realized the answer laid in the young man's poverty.
I suppose I feel an obligation to you, Frank, as your family, but these little creatures are worth a mint. I couldn't sell you a pair for any less than $1,000. Nope, nothing less than $1,000, and that would be giving you a deal.
Thank you, Uncle Robert, thank you! Give me some time to raise the money and I'll be back to collect my Todd and Vixen. You'll pick out a good pair for me, right?
Without a doubt, Frank, without a doubt.
As Frank rode away from the ranch, Robert likely reassured himself that he had seen the last of his nephew and smiled at his own cleverness. But Frank was a determined young man with visions of wealth in his head. Upon arriving home, he paid an immediate visit to his parents.
Mother and Father, I've been to visit Uncle Robert at his fox ranch at Blackbanks. He's rolling in money from raising silver black foxes and selling their pelts. He's willing to sell me a breeding pair for $1,000. Would you be able to lend me the money?
Have you lost your mind, Frank? $1,000 is a fortune.
Your mother is right, my boy. You, of all people, should know that. It is years of work to make such a sum. To risk borrowing it on 2 foxes that could die or never breed is unimaginable, son. It would be pure foolishness for us to even think of supporting you in such a scheme.
But Father...
No buts about this matter. It is out of the question.
Though disappointed at his parents' lack of support, Frank refused to be discouraged or to give up on his newfound dream. He traveled to the nearby town of Summerside and paid a visit to his cousin, Robert S. Bonus, an established photographer.
Good morning, Robert. How are you today?
Just fine, Frank. It's been some time since I've laid eyes on you. What can I do for you? No doubt Alice would love a fine photograph of you.
It's another form of business I wish to speak to you about, Robert. I've heard that you, on occasion, lend money, so I wish to put a business proposition to you.
Give me the details. I'm always open to a good business deal.
As you may have heard, Uncle Robert is doing well in raising foxes and selling their pelts in Europe. He's willing to help establish me in the fox business by selling me a breeding pair at a fair price of $1,000.
$1,000. That's a lot of money, Frank. Even for someone like me who has done quite well in this new business of photography. Are you sure you want to undertake such a large loan?
I have never been more sure of anything in my life.
Oh, I guess he who never takes a risk never prospers. Now, I like foxes. They are great subjects of my photographs. Just because I like them and I like you, I will lend you the money at an interest rate of 6%. The payment will be due in the fall when you sell the pelts.
6% interest did not make for a cheap loan in the year 1906, especially when one is depending on income from eggs and pork. But Frank never batted an eye and refused to think of any scenario other than success. He joyfully arrived back at his uncle's fox ranch with money in hand. The shocked Robert Tuplin kept his word, took the money and placed a Todd and a Vixen in a jute potato bag and handed it to the gleeful Frank, who headed home. He placed the young pair in a pen he had constructed in the woods behind his farm. All that he could afford to feed the animals was bread, which Alice was recruited to bake each day. And the waiting began.
It's spring, Frank. You said there would be pups, and there isn't. Where will the money come from to pay for the loan?
We'll find it, Alice, somehow. We can't lose faith. We'll be sure to have pups next spring.
The next spring came and went. No pups were born on the farm of Frank Tuplin.
You want me to keep making bread every day for those useless animals, Frank? Please pelt them out and get what you can towards that loan.
Not yet, Alice. We need more time.
The snow of winter melted away to the third spring of Frank's venture into foxes. No pups were born.
There is no money for groceries, Frank. You'll have to go to Holman's department store for a credit. We need flour, not just for ourselves, but for those useless foxes.
I already did go to Holman's, and they said no.
What now, then? What's the next big idea to get out of your first big idea?
I think the Todd is the reason there's no pups. I'm going to pelt him out, and with the money, get another Todd.
I was talking about groceries. How do you plan to get groceries and food to feed our family?
Frank decided to approach his father for a small loan to tide them over. He tried to be optimistic about the prospects for fox pups after the next mating season.
Good morning, Frank. You're looking a little down in the mouth.
I hate to ask, Father, but might you loan me a few dollars for groceries? I figure there are no pups because the Todd is a duff. If I pelt him out for a new one, there'll be pups next spring and I can pay you back.
Good grief. Are you still holding on to that dream of yours? You're pouring good money after bad. Cut your losses and put it on the loan. Please, Frank. The stress of this venture is killing your mother and me.
But Frank carried through on his plan, and a new Todd brought the desired results.
Alice, the vixen is whelped. We have fox pups on the farm.
Thank the Lord! Thank the Lord!
Word spread like wildfire that pups had been born on Frank Tuplin's New Annan farm. Every businessman on the island who had coaxed, pleaded, and badgered the Big Six in the West to sell them breeding stock smiled. If someone could be persuaded to break the combine, they were certain it was Frank. They descended on him like flies on raw meat.
Now listen here. There's no way I can agree to sell any breeding stock. That wouldn't be right.
But Frank was a sensible man. He knew there was far more money to be made in selling breeding stock than in selling pelts. So he was persuaded to break the promise to his Uncle Robert, who, as we recall, had not kept his promise to the Big Six. Remember the Holman department store in Summerside, which had denied Frank credit for groceries? One of the owners, Harry T. Holman, was suddenly interested in talking with Frank.
We've wanted to get into the fox business for some time now. What's your price, Tuplin?
Well, sir, I really like that big new house you built on Beaver Street. She's a beauty. I'll trade you 2 pairs of foxes for the house.
All right, you've got yourself a deal.
With Tuplin selling breeding stock, the other men of the Big Six knew there was no point in holding out. They too began to sell, and the gold rush was launched. Anywhere in the world that a silver fox industry was established, it was said the breeding stock came from Prince Edward Island. B.I. Rayner was credited with receiving the highest price for a pair at $32,000. Tuplin went from rags to riches.
Alice, does a trip to Florida this winter appeal to you?
Why not? The English tutor can look after the children.
And there's no reason I can't talk fox business on the beach.
Foxy Frank breaks his promise. Narrator, Stuart Smith. Frank Tuplin, Dan Casely. Alice Tuplin, Michelle Askew. Uncle Robert Tuplin, Ken Gay. Father, Albert Goody. Mother, Janet Rose Hurst. Robert Bonus, Wayne Wright. Mr. Holman, Stephen Hurst. Musician, Christine Anderson Gallant. Sound Foleys, Krista Bryson, Alexandra Gallant, Nathan Wiley. Recording artist, Peter Gallant. Writer, Marlene Campbell. Researcher and editor, Jean McKay. Introduction, Lowell Eustis. This radio drama is brought to you by Wyatt Heritage Properties Inc. through support from the building communities through Arts and Heritage Funding Program of the Department of Canadian Heritage and the Province of Prince Edward Island and the City of Summerside.